Can somebody tell me why do game developers keep making the choice of buying the game or not harder and harder? Why is it so hard to make a good game that is also polished? And why is it so hard to make a polished game that is also good? That doesn't have any intrusive online DRM, that doesn't require you to download any additional launchers, that doesn't have crippling performance issues, and so on. In my last review, I laid out 3 criteria for figuring out whether an action roguelike is engaging and fun, or if the game is bad. And those 3 criteria were as follows: how responsive your character is, do you have any control over your runs and RNG, and is the combat interactive, and does it feel like a dance between 2 opponents. Most games don't pass these 3 criteria, but Ravenbound smashes all 3 of them perfectly as far as I'm concerned, and I still can't recommend it to most people, so you can imagine how messy everything else in the game is. There is an audience that will love playing this game, and I am one of those people. I will actually continue playing the game after the review, but that audience is only going to be people with a high tolerance for bullshit surrounding an amazing core game. This review is neither gonna be a recommendation for or against, but a guide to help you figure out whether this game is right for you. And with the expectations properly set, let's begin. Let's tackle the core design elements of the game first, because that is where this game absolutely excels. With this being a third-person melee game, and with most melee games generally sucking really hard, the first criteria of responsiveness should be something that a game like this fails. You have definitely played Skyrim or any of the countless melee RPGs that make you feel like you're using a feather duster to drain enemies of health slowly, rather than making actual meaningful and impactful choices in close quarters combat. So it is a genuine miracle that a game like this that relies heavily on RPG mechanics absolutely knocks combat out of the park. It is not only satisfying to control, but it genuinely mixes some of the best action game elements and adds them to your character's kit so that you can have real choice in how you approach every encounter. As you can see in the background footage, the character feels floaty and light to control movement-wise, but when you're locked onto the enemies, your attacks propel you forward towards the enemy with a generous margin for error, meaning that you have a lot of freedom with both avoiding and dealing damage in close combat encounters. You can cancel any attack into a dodge roll or into a parry, or you can also choose to go for a stagger if you're feeling like you can take the risk. And every single option has a different risk and reward and is better in different situations, meaning that the game actively asks you to make choices every second of combat. On top of that, there is 5 different weapon types that all feel great to control and push you to play and build differently. If you wanna rely on a parry and big CC moves, you can always pick up a sword and shield. If you wanna cleave through groups of enemies or decimate enemies with really slow and calculated attacks, you can go with a long sword or an axe. Or if you wanna be annoying and have lots of mobility and apply tons of status effects, you can go with something really fast like twin axes or twin swords. All of these options also tie into the RPG elements because you can build every single weapon in a different way. But as you play and you unlock more variants within your builds, you will be able to mix and match some really interesting combinations. The most important questions I want to ask and answer in this section is: can you get good enough to beat any boss in the game with your starter weapons without taking damage? And can you beat the game in your first run if you are an absolute god gamer? And the answers to both of those questions are a resounding yes. So as far as I'm concerned, in terms of responsiveness and what your character can do, this game is one of the best lately when it comes to roguelikes. The second criteria is how much control you have over your runs and RNG. And this is another thing that this game does extremely well. There is a lot of things locked between repeating runs, but it never feels like too much because it is side grade and not direct upgrades to your weapons most of the time. And if you really like some of the traits, for example, you don't have to unlock any other ones, so you can keep the RNG pool of what you get really low and kinda get to play the build that you want every game. For example, I unlocked the trait to get 30% crit chance increase every time I dodge, so that I can get to play crit build every game, and that was really fun for me. And it is great that the game gives you an option to do that, instead of forcing variety down your throat like most games do. Just like it's great to have an option to click that like button if you're enjoying the video so far. Besides the control that you have before the runs, it is also important to have variance between the runs and have every run feel different, and this game pulls it off really well. It's up there with the best of them, and that is where the open world structure comes in. As you beat the bosses in each area, you permanently unlock the next one to play. and whenever you restart a run, you can select any of those areas to start from. These areas are scaled down to your power level, letting you cater your run to the areas that you enjoy playing and not the order that the game pushes onto you. Of course, you can't really manipulate the difficulty because no matter which area you pick as your second and third, you will always get new enemies in them and they will always be harder than at the beginning. So even if you play the first area as your last one, it will still be scaled up to be as hard as any other one. That lets Ravenbound avoid the pitfall of so many roguelikes that make you replay the first and second levels a million times by letting you choose how you want to go about your run and not punishing you for picking the most enjoyable route. You also must have noticed that you fly over the world in the Raven form, and that form lets you see the treasures and enemies in each camp, so you can purposefully go and fight for the treasures that you need for current upgrades, or you can just pick the hardest ones so that you get best level ups overall. The game is really flexible in letting you pick your route and letting you balance the risk and reward of fighting hard battles or keeping your health for the boss fights. All that the game wants from you is to be the final boss after beating any of the 3 temples that you choose, and it doesn't really care how you get there. It goes deep with the RPG elements and gives you an extraordinary amount of control without being overbearing. And the final and most important tenet, in my opinion, is the interactiveness on combat, and this is where Have a Nice Death stumbled the hardest and where Ravenbound excels the most. There are many different enemy types and all of them can have different weapons and movesets, and you will often find them grouped together, so using your spacing and your parry strategically while manipulating the enemies is paramount to your success. Even the most simple of enemies give you a lot of freedom in how you want to approach combat, and they let you pick the level of risk that you want to take in order to get what you want. With every attack you can choose to dodge back and poke them slowly. If their stagger meter is high, you can risk it and go for a knockdown, or if you're feeling really confident, you can go for a perfect parry. Ravenbound has all the hallmarks of what makes action combat actually fun. It is one of those games that the more you play, the more fun it is, because you know that you will discover deeper intricacies of combat. If you're a fan of the same games that I am, the games on the screen, you will probably adore the combat in this game, even if it takes a bit of getting used to. And I really want to make a point that this is no small feat, because most games fail in this specific regard, and Ravenbound passes it with flying colors. The enemy variety as you progress the runs also pushes you to be better and better, and the bosses are varied and fun enough the further you go. Every tool in your arsenal plays well with the combat system and you are forced to use it to their full potential. So with all of these absolutely outstanding feats of game design, and some of that I haven't even covered, like these beautiful graphics and the genuinely interesting risk-reward structure to approaching runs, why can I not recommend this game to most people? It comes down to 4 main warnings that I have for anybody who is interested in buying this game, and I really urge you to watch these if you're interested in playing. Number 1, and maybe the biggest issue, is the performance. If you're not lucky like me, you probably don't have a 3080 to run the game, and the minimum requirements will say a 1050 or a 1050 Ti, but reading Steam reviews, a lot of people are having terrible crashes even on recommended hardware, and that is ridiculous. The game also has no ultrawide support, so if you are not playing in 16:9 and you're annoyed with the GUIs that aren't optimized for your screen, you should also probably avoid this one. If you genuinely like everything about the game that I did say so far and your worry is performance, you can still buy the game on Steam and request a refund in the first 2 hours of your playtime if the game is performing poorly for you. Steam will always give you a refund, no questions asked, as long as you have less than 2 hours of playtime. Also, the game has some sort of a memory leak issue, because the more you play, the game runs worse and worse, so every 2 runs or so I restart the game just to have better performance, and that is not acceptable. Warning number 2 is overall lack of polish, which is mind-boggling because there was so much care put into the core system that having the game just be unpolished is not something that I can understand for a game of this quality. Even though the game is feature complete, I think it needed like 3 or 4 more months in the oven to fix the performance issues and add basic things like voice acting to add to the atmosphere of the game. There's nothing worse than just seeing the text on the bottom of the screen to remind you that you're playing an unfinished game. It is such a shame because there is genuinely not too much to voice act. There's a few dialogues with the gods, there's a few side quests, and there's a few voice lines that your Raven tells you, and voice acting those would just add so much to the atmosphere. There are also weird bugs like flickering objects and NPCs disappearing once you leave the city and come back. This has happened to me on multiple runs. And also I did have one kind of a game-breaking bug where I couldn't pick up a quest item, and it is such a shame because it looks like it needs just a little bit more polish to have everything else shine, and it is just not there yet. Warning number 3 is that the game is always online, and this one is the most baffling. Yes, the account creation process is really simple and straightforward, but I don't want to have my email address and password in your database. The game is sold on Steam Steam, you can just use Steam for any sort of an online interaction, and there is just one online interaction in the game, and if they decided to make the game always online just because of that one interaction, I don't think that was a good choice. And if you take a look at the Steam reviews, many people agree. And the final warning is that this is a $30 game. Hades is 25, Dead Cells is 25, Slay the Spire is 20, Cult of the Lamb is 23, Binding of Isaac is 15, Noita is 19, take that as you will. With all of these factors coming together, it is really hard knowing without any context why this game turned out like it did. To me, it looks like it was the pressure to release the game because they were running out of funds, or maybe the publisher was pushing them to, I do not know. But the missing voice acting, the lack of polish that surrounds the genuinely amazing core game are such a tragedy. I feel that this game could have been something for a much bigger audience than it currently is, and not just for the players like me who can deal with the lack of polish, who do have a high-end PC, who don't mind dropping $30 for a game, and who find fun in just deep combat systems that push you to replay the game dozens of times. That is a small target audience and smaller than they could go. If after all of this you are on the fence, I would just recommend waiting for a sale and then refunding the game if the game is not running well on your system. However, if you think that this game might be for you, you should probably give it a try. You can always refund it if you don't like it. Well, thank you very much for watching. You have been a wonderful audience. My name has been Essential, and I will see you next time.